Hello! So today in our video, I want to talk to you guys about something that I use in my studio every single day. I taught about 8 students today, and I think I might have used this principle with 6 out of the 8, and the other 2 I've used it before. So this is a really common thing that I use in my teaching and that we can all use as we're working on our voice, and that's the Goldilocks Principle and how it applies to singing and teaching singing. So make sure you stick around to the end because there is a myth busting event that's going to happen that's connected to this Goldilocks principle. So I hope that you'll stick around so that we can talk about that and see how it applies. So what is this Goldilocks principle and why is it important? When we sing and when we're teaching about singing, we have a lot going on. There's physical coordination, that's all the muscles and the bones and cartilages and all the stuff that I was teaching a student yesterday. I was trying to show him a stroboscopy of the vocal folds, and the whole time he's like, I'm like, okay, I'll make a note. Maybe not so many anatomy videos. And he's like, no, it's okay. I know I need to watch it, but so all of the things that make you go, that's the physical coordination of all the different body parts, and there's a lot. Then we have the breathing coordination, which is how the breath moves in and out of our body just, regularly, but then also how it interacts with the voice and all the muscles and the cartilages and the bones and all that stuff. Then there's the neuro-emotional. Doesn't that sound fancy? The neuro-emotional coordination. It's basically how our brain and our emotions interact with all those other things. And these are all, it's a lot to coordinate just to make a sound, just to sing happy birthday for crying out loud. And then we have to account for, all the sciencey stuff like physics and acoustics and big things that sometimes these words don't make sense to us. But all these things are happening, and it's a lot. It's a lot to juggle. And that's why, there's a lot of different ways we can screw it up. I like to say, there's an unlimited number of ways that we can screw up our voice. There's lots of variables at play. One of the things I joke about sometimes is that, I just kind of want to write a really complicated algebra problem on my walls and just say, that's what singing is. Once you figure it out, let me know. So the point of the variables is what's right for me is different than what might be right for you. And every single person is unique, 100%. So it gets really tricky when, we're talking about do this and do that, because there's no such thing as a cookie cutter one size fits all instruction. Literally the most basic instruction that you give needs to be customized to the person in front of you. As a teacher and as a singer, when you hear these instructions, they need to be customized for you. I would love to share a little story about my own training. I was that person that the teacher would say, do this, and then I'd like, okay, I'm not quite sure what that means, but I'm going to do my best. And then they'd go, yeah, no, that's right. And in my head, this is what was running. It's like, how do you know that that's right? You don't know what I just did inside my body. I felt something very murky happening somewhere down here, and I have zero idea how I did that or why it's good and how my sound changed. And this is what would be going through my head in voice lessons. It wasn't until many, many years later that I realized it was that individuality, that I was getting these instructions that maybe weren't super clear or customized for me. Anytime I talk about my own training, you have to remember this happened in another century. And a lot of what we know now today wasn't around. So it's not that I had bad teachers. They truly were doing the best that they could with the tools that were at their disposal back in another century. But what we know now today is that really there's a lot of things at play, and we really need to account the individual in front of us to give them the best training that they can receive. So we can get into big trouble if we just go with, yeah, take a deep breath and support your sound more and make sure you engage your core. That was always one that I got. You just need to support more. And I'm like, but I don't know, my abs are pretty engaged right now. How much more can they engage, And that was actually the wrong instruction for me, but it's what, it was the thing back then. Just engage your core and support more and you'll be fine. So gosh darn it, I was squeezing everything I could squeeze. It really actually ended up being spectacularly bad for my voice in the long run. But again, my teachers were absolutely doing the best that they could do at the time, that, you know, based on the knowledge that we knew at that point. I sound like I'm 800 years old when I talk about how archaic it is, but that's how much we've grown in the last, you know, 15, 20 years in vocal science. Okay, let's talk about this Goldilocks principle and how it applies to you and why it's so important. So we all know Goldilocks. She was a trespasser, by the way. So I'm not encouraging that you trespass or steal other people's things. But the problem she had was that this bed was too hard, this bed was too soft, this bed was just right. Now, if another random teenager had trespassed into the house, the one that was right for Goldilocks may not have been right for this other person, right? It's a sleep number bed. Everybody has their own number, and this is what we know, or so I've been told. I don't have a sleep number bed, but so I've been told that it's pretty cool. So we need to decide what's right for you. Yes, we all need to take a deep breath, whatever that means. And yes, we also need to support our sound, whatever that means. I like to speak in air quotes. I don't typically use the word support in my studio, but yes, we need to know how to manage the pressurized air inside our body when we are singing. But what you need to do to get there is very different maybe than what I need to do to get there, and we need to look at the individual person. So that's where Goldilocks comes in. It's figuring out what's just right for you. And that's where it gets super fun. And this works literally on anything. I haven't found something that this principle doesn't work on when we talk about voice training. So we can talk about your breath, we can talk about your support, there's my air quotes again. We can talk about your alignment, meaning how do you stand. We can talk about how much effort do you need to, you know, put in to produce the sound, because there is a little bit of effort. You can't just be languishing, you know, to hit the high notes, especially if you're belting. But there definitely is a sweet spot where if you cross that line, whatever that line is for you, that then you're going to end up really straining and potentially even hurting yourself. How much do I need to compress my vocal folds? You know, like, do I need to give them a little more oomph? Maybe I'm doing a little too, not enough oomph in the vocal folds. So this works literally for anything. And it's really just, it's a self-analysis. And we start with, you have to know your anatomy and physics and a little bit of acoustics. So we have to know, what are the body parts? Like what are they supposed to do? How are they supposed to interact with each other? And then build a really clear understanding of effort versus intensity, because you can have a very intense sound without actually engaging a lot of effort. I always, you know, there's always somebody in your life where you watch this video or you see somebody live, or maybe it's a really good friend of yours. This is my friend Marissa Esposito. I'm speaking of you, where they look like literally they're the most relaxed human being you've ever seen, and then they open their mouth and this gigantic energetic sound comes out, and they can do this and look like they could be taking a nap at the same time. They're that relaxed, and you just go, how do you do that? Well, that's them balancing how much effort do they need. Effort is different than intensity. You can have a very intense sound with very little effort, surprisingly. So it's understanding that it's a balance. You know, you give the exact right amount of effort that you need for that particular sound and that particular color in your voice, but not one drop more. Another thing that you want to understand and learn to balance is the difference between feeling pressure inside your body and then pushing, which is kind of, it's kind of, there's a lot of overlap, right? Because you can also feel intensity and go, well, wait a minute, do I need to push back against that intensity, or do I need to push back against this pressure? When we sing, there are pressure changes that happen in our body, and we want to manage them, but we definitely don't want to push back against it. So it's understanding those kinds of things. And then once you understand that, now you go, okay, so this is function. I know that I'm not supposed to push, but I'm going to feel some pressure changes, and that's okay. And I know that there's going to be some intensity, but that doesn't mean that I have to work really hard to get that intensity. All right, so I'm starting to see a little bit of this clarity coming. Then you use I like to use the extremes to find the middle. So if this bed was too hard and this bed is too soft, this bed is just right, somewhere in the middle, we do that with whatever it is. So if we know that I'm over engaging my abs, let's just use that as an example. Okay, I'm gonna really over engage my abs, and this does gorgeous things to my voice, doesn't it? And then I do the opposite. Now I'm so floppy that I'm about to fall over. Well, we know that that's not right either. Then we go back to, okay, so I'm going to engage my abs again, but maybe not quite so much. And then I'm going to go back to, but maybe not quite so much. And then you want to make sure you're engaging the right muscles, and that's where you need to work really closely with your teacher. Or, you could book a session with me because I'm a voice teacher too. Or you have to do the study. You have to understand what parts need to engage. Then you do this back and forth dance until you find what your Goldilocks spot is. And you'll know when you're there because your voice will sound better. And remember, you can't trust what you hear inside. So it might be that you have to record yourself and hear it back. You won't feel strained. You won't feel like you're having to work super hard to get there. You'll know when you're there because it's just like all of a sudden everything gets easy and you're getting the sound that you want. So this is how I like to use the extremes to find the middle. And you can do this on your own, but not everything is a DIY project. And that's where I come in. Or I can give you a list as long as my arm of teachers that understand this concept and principle and can put it to work in the studio with you. So the most important thing is for you to understand that we have to address the function. And we know that I can do this and I can do that, but that's not what's perfect for me. What's perfect for me is that balancing point where then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is just kind of happening on its own. I'm not making it happen. It's not hard work, but there's a lot of energy and intensity and a great tone. And that's when you know that you're on the right track. So hopefully that makes sense. So at the beginning of the video, I said, if you stick around to the end, we're going to talk about busting a myth that is a direct correlation to this Goldilocks principle. This is one of the biggest misunderstandings that I come across with people because, I like to work with breath. It's kind of my thing. I do a lot with breathing. And one of the things that I think is most misunderstood is this concept of engaging your abs. A lot of people have been taught or have the understanding that you really want to engage the abs kind of like you're going to get punched in the stomach and you're going to tighten up that six-pack to brace for that impact. And that is, I would say, towards the Papa Bear beds being a little too hard end of the spectrum. The role of the abs in breath support or in supporting your sound is one that is stretch and hug. So there should be a flexible dynamic quality in the abs, which isn't there if you're bracing to get punched in the gut. So if you're getting instruction like that, that to me would be a red flag that you want to go, this might be a cookie cutter instruction that isn't really going to address me as an individual. So that's a myth bust right there. And there's just scads and scads of scientific literature to support this. And it would be really interesting to see what would happen if you're one of those people that thinks you have to have the really, really tight abs. Just soften them a little bit, give yourself a little hug in the abs, and then sing and see if you can feel a difference in your throat. When I was demonstrating with really, really tight abs, you can hear how it really affects my voice. I feel a lot more tension in my throat than I do when I have that stretch and hug mentality. That's my Goldilocks spot. It took me a little while to find it, but now that I'm there, I never want to leave because it's much more comfortable. And that's when I stopped losing my voice. I used to get vocal fatigue all the time. And once I made that adjustment, and it wasn't a matter of letting go all the way, but reframing it so that I wasn't just locking down my abs, but allowing them to stretch and then give a really gentle hug the entire time I was singing, that's when my vocal health took a dramatic turn for the better. So that's my myth bust for today. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you guys soon. Have a great week. Bye.